Hello and welcome to another edition of NCI Live. I'm your host, David Groth, Technical Solutions Specialist here at Network Center. Joining me today is Jon Ryan, partner in crime and another Technical Solutions Specialist. How you doing today, Jon?
Hey, thanks, David. Doing great.
Awesome. So thank you for joining us, everyone, today. We are live on both LinkedIn and YouTube. So if you'd like to text us or message us your questions, we'd be happy to do our best to join them or to answer them live on the air. With that, today we're going to be talking about kind of a recurring series. We're going to be talking about Microsoft updates and what we've got new going on in the 365 world. So with that, Jon, what's new with you today?
Not too much. Just, there's a lot of things coming out with 365 and I guess the hosted environment that more and more people are getting into. Obviously, one of the biggest things is the CrowdStrike problem that a lot of people just had or are currently having. We didn't have too many of our customers that were affected by it, but globally, I think they said what the cost is in the trillions or something like that for loss of work and everything. So obviously these systems and services that are hosted can sometimes play a little havoc if not tested correctly. So I would say just as kind of a rule of thumb for everybody is to try to spin up a test environment as much as you can for anything, even if it's your own hosted software or own in-house software. Spin up a test environment, make sure that the patches work good, make sure you don't have any outage time, and just kind of try to cover yourself if you can as best as possible.
First, test it first, no matter what it is, a patch, or don't always try to be on the latest and greatest. I mean, patching is super, super important, but before you apply it to everyone and everything, do your best to test it first.
Yeah, we used to, back in the day, David, you probably remember this, is when server versions, back when they had horse and buggy. No, when servers first came out, server versions came out, we'd always wait for the first service pack to come out that had all the bugs and fixes, because it seemed like a lot of times that first version was the dog food version, put it out there and see what happens kind of thing. Companies are getting better at eating their own dog food, if you want to call it that. But still, you never know until you know, right? So
it was always interesting to me how, the people who wanted to see all the features that were out there, and they sort of kind of worked, and they worked for the most part. Like the biggest possible features worked, but then like when they went from, was it NT, like Windows NT, when it went from NT to Windows 2000 and then to Windows Server, and they had Active Directory. When that first came out, Active Directory worked for the most part. Then they had some domain things that they had to sort out. And the first service pack was a huge deal. So very important. I agree on that one.
So I think today, we're going to talk about some of the trends, I guess, that we're seeing in the 365 environment. We're going to talk about a couple of updates for Copilot. I know that's still very much on the minds of people that want to use it. And we'll go through some of these things and just kind of have a casual conversation about it and field any questions that we get.
Certainly. Yep, absolutely. So what do you want to talk about first?
Let's start with the Copilot updates, just
Okay.
because that's probably the least amount of kind of freewheeling discussion portions of it.
Mhm.
Um, so as you know, as new tools come out with 365, they're constantly being improved. They're getting feedback from, end users. And as we can tell, there's hundreds and hundreds of updates that come out. So when we look through, this to do our presentations for the 365 updates, there's a lot of stuff going on. Like I'm constantly seeing Purview stuff in there. They're doing a lot with like the desktop version of Outlook. And
Yeah.
what it can do and a lot of different things as it relates to all of the additional tools that they're creating, and they're just kind of fine tuning everything as they go. Back to our kind of conversation about dog fooding, put it out there, get people using it, find out what works for people, find out what doesn't work, and then tweak it from there. So recently, Copilot has been able to add sourcing from third-party data via Fabric. So if you have like software as a service, if you have external sources. So before, Copilot was basically Copilot, the basic version of Copilot could go out to the internet and find resources to add to a presentation that you're trying to create. Then the pro version of it, you could use your own resources. So you could pull from on-prem data and have those kind of connectors to do that. Now they're opening it up so you can pull it from third-party data, approved third-party data. So basically, like let's say, and I haven't seen a list. It's probably going to be, companies are probably going to have to either enroll or sign up or something to get it to work or enable something to get it to work. But like, let's say you have Salesforce or something like that, and you want to pull from software as a service, so a third-party application that's hosted by somebody else.
Mhm.
They're making that possible through Fabric. So they're allowing you to pull in resources not only on-prem, not only on the internet, but through third-party applications.
Certainly. Yeah, that's a huge deal because uh, having all your data in 365 is great, but it's not the only place for data. I mean, being able to run through like Copilot for Sales is something that they introduced, but not everybody has Dynamics to be able to use for your CRM software. I mean, people are going to have other platforms, and then being able to
Sure.
do that is huge. And we are only going to see more and more connectors that will attach. So I can foresee that ecosystem just growing and growing and growing. And the side benefits are that you also get reporting engines and so forth on top of that too with those connectors. So that's
Yep.
excellent.
And along with expanding kind of that ability, to search different sources and everything, they now have it available to reference PDFs. So just like you can take a PDF and you can, bring it into Word and you can have it, pretty much convert it into a Word document. Through Word and Copilot, you can actually read PDFs and you can reference information out of those PDFs. So
Mhm.
instead of having to have it as a text file, you can do it through a PDF now. So that's kind of a big thing, especially if you think about the internet and how many PDF documents are in the internet versus, text documents. So that should open the ability to source more files.
So now you mentioned Purview and a few other things, and that leads down the data governance discussion. But one thing that I saw in the updates that are constant, and the reason we do these, and people that watch fairly regularly know that the reason we do these is 365 is constantly updating. The 365 of a year ago is not the 365 of today. Um, but one of the things that at request by a lot of people, what they did for Copilot, and they just released this, is the ability to um, silo certain pieces of information in SharePoint. So you can tell Copilot, don't access these data libraries. Just don't. So that was another feature that I came across that was particularly interesting. Like if you wanted to say high security data, like, HR data and whatnot,
Yeah.
be able to store that yet completely isolate it.
And I think that's important too, because you as a user might have access to certain types of sensitive data.
Mhm.
But as an organization, that doesn't mean I want you putting that in a presentation and sharing it with people, you know?
Yeah.
So having the ability to still be able to access that data, and so it's not just made or built on, your level of permissions. You can silo that data and just basically fence it and basically say, no, all of the HR stuff is, you know, um, not available for running reports, So,
Like,
and in that case too, though, David, I think you have to turn it off for everyone, right? You can't, I think you fence it for everyone, don't you? It's not by user.
right. It's a silo for that library,
Content.
the
Yeah. Yep.
library
Okay. That's what I
aside.
thought.
Mhm.
Yep.
Um, so
Yeah. So if you have Bill who you don't trust, um, you'd have to turn off his permissions if you wanted to let other people access that data. You'd have to restrict his permissions,
that's my
or
understanding.
you would just yeah, or you would just have to turn off that, like you said, that data silo. You'd have to make that unavailable for everybody.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Like they could still access the data, but Copilot ignores it.
Right.
So,
Yep.
just out of curiosity, and we each have our different experiences when it comes to this, but what what are your, the clients you talk to? Are they talking about Copilot, or have they used it? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I'm seeing from customers is a lot of people are using it. First of all, they're kind of content creators. So they're
Mhm.
people who make documents, people who need to create content that maybe they don't have a writer in their company, or they just want to make it sound better, whatever
Sure.
they're creating for content. And when I say content, I mean, even like emails, sending information to maybe their customers, and they want it to just sound a little better. They're not the greatest writers. I think one of the things that, unfortunately, that Word and stuff like that has kind of filled in some of the blanks, corrected our spelling, maybe made recommendations on how to, formulate sentences and stuff. And I think you kind of rely on that a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people type how they talk, right? So, a lot of times you can say, rephrase this and make it sound more official. And it'll go through and do that kind of stuff. So I think as far as like, instead of having to hire an actual writer for your company, I think it can kind of help fill that gap of making your content more official.
Certainly.
And then I think some people use it to get information, right? So I don't know anything about this. And instead of spending 3 hours, Googling stuff and trying to find out as much information as I can on this, or asking a whole bunch of people, I can ask Copilot to go out and find out what the top 3 selling widgets are. And it'll go out and find that based on the information that it gets. So it's very much a time saver for people who create that kind of content. I haven't seen a lot of people using it yet in in like Teams and summarizing meetings and stuff like that as much. But a lot of people are still kind of getting used to Teams too. So I think as people kind of grow into the tools that are out there, I think that'll get them to appreciate the abilities that Copilot might have. A lot of people just watch a meeting and they're just along for the ride type of deal. So how have you seen it?
Well, I've seen pretty much those same kinds of things. I think people are finding applications for it where they didn't think. The meeting summary one is one that has really caught people's attention. That's one that I personally use. And another one is grant proposals. Those people that are nonprofits that do grant proposals, or writing the long documents that are or repetitive, those have come across, those people have said, well, would this work for that? And yeah, those are the ones that really are like, oh, okay, well, let's try it. And then, because it's that time saver And it really comes down to, just like any other tool, it comes down to the time savings. And that's where the value comes in for them. It's like any other tool in IT, any other program that you buy, and you're looking for it to solve some kind of problem. And AI in general, but also specifically Copilot, is really a time saver. It's summarizing is what it does really good. And creativity, it does, but it's really a variant of summarizing, because the creativity is just educated plagiarism is a term I'm going to coin, because
Sure.
it's taking from different sources, but it's also basing it on your information. It's not word for word plagiarism, like that term is not maybe 100% accurate, but it's
Yeah.
basing it on your data and your formats and other things. So
I think what I've seen too is the humanization of it, like your tone or
mhm,
flavoring it with maybe your personality
sure,
and stuff, it obviously can't do very well,
yeah,
You can, if you have a document that you wrote that has a lot of your kind of vernacular or attitude in it or whatever you want to call it,
mhm,
and you're basing it off of that, then it'll take the stylings from that. But a lot of times when you're just pulling straight content from, the source material, a lot of times it's going to go off of the tone of the source material. You can tell it to write it in a happier tone or something, but
yeah,
still, it knowing what your personality is and how you would present information, it's not going to know, right? So you have to go through. And I think I would recommend that with anybody who's using any kind of chat GPT or Copilot or any of that kind of stuff, is really read through the content that it creates for you. Don't just take it at face value and
absolutely,
blast it off to somebody. Read through it and go, okay, first of all, is this what I'm trying to say?
yeah,
Because it can go rogue sometimes,
yep,
depending upon how well you describe what you're trying to get. But look at the content, make sure A, is this what I want to, get across?
yep,
B, does this sound like something that would come from me or the company that I work for?
right,
Um, does this follow our standards in practices? Or is this just information that is just grabbing willy-nilly from the internet,
mhm,
So I think those are important things to use it. And, like it's called Copilot. So it's there to help, but it's not there to do it for you. So I think you still have to be the person that does the checks and balances and make sure to validate the content.
absolutely. I'm going to take a quick break here for 1 second and remind those people that have joined us and say that we are live on both LinkedIn and YouTube. So if you have a question and you'd like to ask us, by all means, or you have a comment or anything like that, feel free to message us, and we'll answer it live on the air and discuss it. So, any rate, all right, moving on. What else?
Yeah, one last thing on Copilot.
Yep.
You do have the option now to specify a URL to reference content. So like if you, instead of just having something go out to the internet to grab whatever resources are available, you can actually say, hey, this is a good source for information.
Yeah.
Please create content based off of these sources or this URL specifically.
Yeah.
And it'll go out, and whatever it can see, it'll grab from that URL. So that's kind of nice. So you don't have to keep saying, try again or not good enough or find more, sources. If you know specifically, you can actually add that into your request.
Go look here.
So,
Yeah, that's cool.
yep.
Yeah, very cool. All right. So moving on, what else have you got for us today?
So yeah, let's go to one of the things that we've been seeing a lot is people who are interested in more of the 365 tools, but are maybe limited by the service that they have, meaning, and more specifically, the GoDaddy 365. So a lot of people who sign up for a domain, they need email of some sort. They maybe have a website that they need to host. A lot of people can get that in, kind of a one spot through GoDaddy. So a lot of people are signing up for the GoDaddy tenants. And what happens with that is GoDaddy only supports a certain tool set within the 365 ecosystem.
Yep.
So you're limited, like you can't add calling, there's, some of the stuff that you want to do that's maybe advanced security and everything. They just don't support it because the GoDaddy support team doesn't want to deal with any of that kind of stuff. So the licensing that you get from them is like a restricted license. So you can't bolt on other Microsoft services to it because you're basically in the GoDaddy tenant or the GoDaddy licensing tenant.
Right.
So in the past, we've had to completely move you out of that world into your own tenant, and that's kind of what we can still do today. But basically, get you in your own Microsoft tenant so that you have full access and full availability to all of these tools that come out. That's a heavy lift, right? It's like starting all over again. So what they do have is they have a thing called defederating from GoDaddy services. And basically what you do is you're kind of relicensing your tenant with Microsoft licensing and removing all of the GoDaddy access to it and account information. Now, one of the things with tenant creation for 365 is once you create that tenant, that's the name of that tenant. It lives on forever as that tenant. So if you wanted to change the core name of your tenant, you can't. You have to start a new tenant. And it's just the way that it registers it in 365 and how all that stuff works. Well, GoDaddy uses a kind of a crazy, it says like net or GFT and some randomized number is what your tenant name is under GoDaddy. Most people would say like net center on Microsoft.com. But for them, they use this net or GFT wording. So even if you do kind of defederate yourself from GoDaddy, you can't change that core tenant name. And one of the things that a lot of people don't like about that is that your SharePoint site, if you have an internal SharePoint site, will show that tenant name and then the SharePoint site. So people don't like that, right? So you'd move into your own tenant to fully get rid of that. Well, now, and this is across kind of all SharePoint sites, is you can rename a SharePoint site. So basically the name that you see no longer has to have your onmicrosoft.com as the beginning of it, or this crazy net or GFT thing from GoDaddy on the front side of it. So you can actually rename it to kind of mask that or hide that. Now, your tenant, your core tenant that you log in with an admin is still going to have that, that crazy name on it. So that's one of the things. It's a limitation. You're basically kind of stripping everything away that's GoDaddy except for that originally created tenant. And if that bothers you, or if it's something that you don't want to have any kind of association with GoDaddy, then you'd have to move into your own tenant and do a full migration, which is a way heavier lift over to it. So, and some of that stuff is changing as we get, more and more people using this kind of stuff. I haven't heard anything that says that you can change your tenant name yet, but as that's released, we'll try to keep you guys up to date on that.
And this is big because it makes the process a lot simpler. In the past, it was a pain. I mean, I still have when I got a domain just from my own personal business several years ago, and I still have it, just kept it around. It's I've wanted to move it away, but the process is just a pain. I have to migrate everything. It's just versus this, which is effectively not long at all. I mean, it's a few mouse clicks and some work and some licensing, but it's not a huge deal. Not like it was.
Right. And the thing to remember too is if you are going to move away from the GoDaddy service for 365, you don't have to move everything. You can keep your domain hosting there.
Yep.
You can keep your website hosting there.
Yep.
You can just kind of pluck out the tenant piece of it and move that away from them. So a lot of times too, we get a lot of people that complain about just the response time and troubleshooting and all of that kind of stuff with GoDaddy.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure exactly what their process is, but I'm sure it's something like you engage GoDaddy and then they call Microsoft.
Yeah.
So you're kind of in a two-tier situation as far as support. So, but yeah, so we see more and more people doing that. I would say the advice that, kind of thing to learn from this is if you are thinking about going into 365 and you don't have a tenant created yet, talk to your IT organization and find out what their recommendation is. Especially if you're considering GoDaddy, the pricing is very similar as far as getting your own tenant versus going through the GoDaddy service. So I would definitely get some consulting before you make the decision.
Excellent. Excellent. Good news.
So we have time probably for one more kind of discussion here.
Yep.
And this is a trend that we're seeing a lot from customers who are coming up on, maybe server replacement for hardware, as well as a lot of the services that we see a lot of people use are going towards software as a service. And so they're moving away from having that dependency on an on-prem server.
Mhm.
And in those cases, some people are still authenticating locally, still have a domain controller and a file server maybe on-prem, or putting a domain controller in the cloud in Azure. But for those customers that don't have a need for that anymore, and still the recommended usage for Exchange in the cloud is to have an on-prem Exchange server for management, or at least Exchange management server somewhere, whether that's in Azure or on-prem. You don't have to do that. So if you have a smaller organization, you want to get rid of all of your hardware needs, dependencies on-prem. Obviously, you'll still have firewall and switching and wireless and all of that kind of stuff, and PCs. But if you want to completely get away from on-prem infrastructure, you can authenticate users through Entra ID.
Mm-hmm.
So it's similar to how you authenticate people through a domain controller or Active Directory. But it's using the 365 service and Entra basically to manage all of those profiles and those personalities or identities. So the big change between it is because a traditional Active Directory has both a machine account and a user account in order to access the network. 365 kind of doesn't care the machine account. That kind of was the main purpose between it starting, is access your data from anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have to be on a machine that's joined to 365 or any of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So they kind of don't care about machine accounts. They do and they don't, right? So they really want you to authenticate on a user identity level. And so that's how you authenticate into 365. You get MFA with that, conditional access, all of that kind of stuff, logging in that way. But now you're not logging in your computer, so you don't have a traditional domain controller with group policy.
Yep.
So you can't manage that endpoint. So Microsoft says, well, hey, if you're going to come in through Entra ID and you still want to manage the endpoints, we recommend you use Intune for that. Right. And so now you can replicate those group policies through Intune to be able to do your desk side management or desktop management. Right. Now, right. You can also run Entra ID for authentication on a machine account. So sounds kind of weird, but you can, if you have an on-prem server, just a single server, let's say, and you don't run a Active Directory on-prem, you can join that machine with an Entra ID as a machine join, as opposed to a user. So you can join that. You wouldn't necessarily want to join all of your machines to it. Right. That's not really the intention of it. But if you do have machines that are not associated with the user, that you're not managing under Intune, then you definitely can join those machines. So you can have an on-prem server. It wouldn't be a domain controller or an Active Directory server. It would just be kind of a random server that you're using for, whatever it happens to be, if it's file shares or a single application or something that you don't need Active Directory to authenticate.
Certainly.
So
and that's a big deal, because the journey towards a complete distributed workforce and the ability to work from anywhere, yet maintain company control and security and all of those pieces, this is a big step. Because in the past, you had to have that server on site for domain control and authentication and all the local pieces, all the hardware related pieces. Now, doing this, the authentication is handled the way it's always been with 365 through the Entra ID, which is effectively your email address. It can be different, but and then you've got the added benefit of things like MFA, the multi-factor authentication, and yeah, it's definitely a big step forward. And Intune, of course, is a wonderful product, especially for group policies and other. They don't call them group policies now. It's policy objects, I believe.
Yeah.
Policy
And
something.
we can replicate a lot of those, in Intune. So there's a lot of stuff that you can carry over if that's something that you really need to do on a desk side level. Obviously you can do localized password and single sign-on and all that kind of stuff, but the main things are still being able to manage those PCs, even though they're not joined to Active Directory or to a domain.
And the cool part about it is you can take a Windows 11 Pro box out of the box, log in with your Entra ID, and all of that stuff comes back, and with Intune, of course, and OneDrive and all that. It's beautiful.
Not to mention, if you are taking advantage of autopilot, where you want to deploy images and applications and everything, you basically send a PC to somebody and they just log into it, and it goes through a process to load all of that in there. So a lot of advantages to doing it that way.
Absolutely. Well, John, we've blasted through 30 minutes, if you can believe that.
That was quick.
Yeah, that was really quick. It always goes by too quick sometimes. So I just wanted to let everybody know that's joining us. If you didn't get your question answered or would like more information, you can email us at info@netcenter.net, or you can visit our website at www.netcenter.net, or visit us on any of our social media channels at LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, where we do go live on LinkedIn and YouTube approximately every 2 weeks. And if you're on YouTube, please click that subscribe and notification bell so that you do get notified when we go live. So to that end, John, again, thanks for joining us and going through the Microsoft updates. Really appreciate it. And we'll be doing this again shortly, I know, because Microsoft being Microsoft, they're going to be updating everything. So
It's been my pleasure.
I really appreciate it. And for those of you joining us, thanks again for joining us on NCI Live. Bye.
Thank you.